It is currently the dead of winter. It's literally snowing outside, and one form of happiness that I find myself getting really excited about is starting to plan my summer travel. The past couple of years, I really have been interested in traveling around Europe as someone who is relatively new to traveling without my family. I've started getting more comfortable with traveling abroad, and I really feel that I'm getting more comfortable with planning trips to international destinations. And today I would like to share my experiences, how I plan them, and any other tips I've learned over the past couple of years from studying abroad and doing my Euro summer travels this past summer. I really enjoyed the videos I made for the trips I've done and also my study abroad series, so if you are looking for more travel inspiration, recommendations for places to go, or if you just like watching travel vlogs, I will link that above here and also in the description. And you can also use that to kind of see the end results of everything I talk about today. A few things I want to preface. This is a video about traveling with a group. I'm sure you can utilize what I'm talking about for solo travel. I've just never experienced solo travel myself, so I wouldn't be the best person to ask about that yet. Also, I will be including budgets and prices, but I want you all to know that people travel with varying budgets and have a great time. So don't think my experience is the only way to travel. And finally, I'm not a professional in any way. I'm just a regular girl who's really interested in traveling in my 20s with my friends, and this is all based on my personal experience. Okay. Budget. For this past Euro summer trip, I traveled for 2 full weeks, so 14 days, and we went to around like 4, technically 5 cities because we did Paris twice on either end, and I spent roughly around $2,600. This was our grad trip, so definitely that contributes to the price of things, and we went to a lot more places than normal. We did more shopping, I feel like, than normal, and this was also our first Euro summer trip as a group. So I feel like those things also factor into what we ended up spending. We flew with Delta, which is definitely more on the pricey side. You can find better options probably, but I am very anxious on flights and I'm very particular about things. So I chose Delta because that's what's familiar to me. And also I feel comfortable flying with them internationally. We flew from JFK to CDG, which is in Paris. It was also like an overnight flight, and that flight was $1,038.90. We ended up staying in Airbnb, so I'll tell you my share of each Airbnb. For Paris Part 1, that was 2 nights for me. My share was $204.36. My share of our Nice Airbnb was $213.71, and that was also 4 nighs. In Camoli, we stayed 2 nights, and my share was $90.53. In Florence, we stayed 3 nights, and it was also just 3 of us instead of 4. My share was $236.84. And then Paris Part 2, we stayed for 2 nights, and it was $138.34. I'm also going to tell you travel costs. From Paris to Nice, we took a train, and that was $124.52. My train from Nice to Camoli was $31.47. Train from Camoli to Florence was $24.79. And then we took a flight from Florence to Paris, and that was $187.60. For food, I actually didn't calculate this, but my friend Anushka calculated it, so I'm just going to tell you hers and say that that's also what I spent. For food and drink, we had an estimate of like $31 per day, and I think in total we ended up spending $275.31. For taxis and Ubers, any rideshare or public transportation, that was $80.62. She also had a miscellaneous of $53.65. I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna say I spent it too. And then for shopping, she had $185.86. We're just gonna call it that. A few money saving tips. One thing we really loved doing was going to local grocery stores and kind of making like home cooked meals. We also did like little picnics. We went to Plage Malo, which is nearby Nice, and we took a picnic basket basically of a few grocery items. And I think it's one of my favorite ways to just kind of like see a little bit of the local culture as well, is just go into the grocery store, pick out a few things to try. Another thing we always did was like share meals and share dishes if we were allowed to. I think that was a great way to just try a bunch of different things and also just save money. Okay, transportation, definitely a big one. So obviously you have one big international flight. One thing we did was we did a round trip from our US start point to CDG in Paris. If you fly into the bigger cities and then take some like internal travel to wherever your first destination is, that can honestly be a great like money saving hack, because there are so many flights that go to like London and Paris, for example, in the day from like the US to those cities, because they're so big and a lot of people travel in between those two. There are so many flights that it ends up being more economical as well. And then traveling internally can be a bit cheaper than doing a whole like big flight to your final destination. But obviously there's a bunch of factors that go into that, like your luggage and everything, which I will be talking about soon. We ended up doing the round trip from Paris and then started and ended our European travels in Paris. I really liked that idea. It really depends. You'll have to do some math with this on if the original flight ends up being cheaper than doing all of that, and also like, do you want to do all that with your luggage and with the time that you have? Something to definitely consider. In terms of internal travel, you can choose between trains and flights. I'd say if the train duration is around like 1 to 3 hours, then it's like definitely worth it. Otherwise, I think you might be better choosing flight options. You just have to like, again, take into account that flight time might be way less, but you have to factor in like getting to the airport, staying at the airport, any delays or anything like that. Trains are definitely quicker in that prep and post transportation. You don't have to go through security for trains, but you have security at the airport for flights. So again, another math thing. Also, I do want to note that the European carry-on situation is a lot different than in the US. Their carry-on luggage sizes itself are smaller than US carry-ons. So definitely check your carry-on size. Also, especially like a lot of the budget airlines, they have really constricting measurements that are allowed to be carried on. You will probably have to end up paying if you do choose the flight route for your baggage. That's how they make their money, basically, through the baggage. Like sometimes the baggage price will be the same price as the flight itself, so definitely take that into account. I personally got away with my luggage. I think I had to like do one upgrade because like literally the base price is just like a handbag or like a little backpack. So to get like a roller bag on the plane, I think is a little bit trickier. I think you definitely have to upgrade for that. Another thing regarding travel is to remember that travel takes a lot of time and energy. If you're doing like 2 weeks, I would say max 3 to 4 cities. Honestly, like 1 to 2 cities if you really want to relax. I think going forward, we're not going to do what we did, which was like 4 or 5 cities. Travel days, like honestly could take up to a day or could take the majority of the day, and it's a lot of effort and you're like lugging your suitcase and stuff. So just factor that in. Be a little bit less ambitious with that because you're going on vacation, you want to enjoy it. Also, it's great to just like base in one city. When I say base, I mean like get your stay in one city and then you could take like day trips out to nearby cities or towns. And I feel like that's a good way of like seeing more places but be based in less cities and like having to like move all your stuff over. Another thing I recommend is to figure out your airport transport ahead of time. Actually, this past time in Florence, we ended up walking quite a bit from our Airbnb just to find a taxi because our flight was super early in the morning because we were trying to like save on that. Uber is not a thing in Florence. There was no like public transport at that time. So like really get that figured out beforehand or just like know that there is something for you, especially if you are taking like earlier flights or trains to minimize costs on that front. Like, just make sure that you can get to the station or the airport. Another thing, figure out what the local public transport is or car situation. For example, the Amalfi Coast has a bus system that is really great, but also like a bit of a learning curve, and you kind of have to learn the bus stops and the bus times and figure that out. You can't Uber into Monaco because it's a separate country, but you can Uber out. Bolt is a pretty popular rideshare app that they use. It's kind of similar to like Lyft, I would say, or Uber. A lot of cities have trams, which are fun. You can get like tram passes, and they're a great way to like move around the city, especially I think Nice had them this past time that we went. In terms of like cars, it ends up being like a lot cheaper than I would say in the US, or at least like me being in New York. I feel like it's a lot cheaper to use cars there than it is here, so something to also consider. I prefer to use public transport than rent my own car or anything, especially places like the Amalfi Coast. I know people do it. If you're not comfortable with it, the public transport is great. Like, people use it all the time, so don't be stressed about that. I prefer it a lot to renting my own car because I don't want to go through that whole process of figuring out how to drive there and where to park and all of that. But it is helpful if you are confident in that. For booking trains, I mainly use Omeo or Trainline. Those are really great. You can also find like the country specific train platform, like Train Italia, I believe is the one for Italy. They are also on Trainline, and I really like their trains. The Nice one's crazy. Like, that's like another thing, like look up the local situation with the trains. The Nice trains were insane. If you watch my South of France video, or actually maybe it was like, you probably see it more in the Camoli video. There's like a segment where Jasmine and Smriti talk about like their travel day and the whole experience of the South of France trains. It's a whole other game. It's crazy, especially if there's anything happening in Monaco. Like, be very strategic with those things and just be aware of what's happening is the biggest thing. All right, let's talk about stays. The main three that we were choosing between were hostels, Airbnbs, and hotels. Actually never chose a hotel, I don't think. If it was a hotel, it was more of like a bed and breakfast, like really cozy vibe. And that was like while I was studying abroad, visiting Italy. I predominantly look on booking.com and Airbnb. Booking.com has a few that are like apartments, so kind of like Airbnb, but I like those two websites. I really like the apartment style living. I think it has all of the stuff that you would need, like laundry, a kitchen if you want to cook some days. Hotels can sometimes feel a bit disjointed from the actual like place that you're visiting, but they are definitely a safe and reliable option. Hostels are actually a really popular option that people choose. They're great for meeting people, and they're very like, you know, like quick, like in and out types of travel. You can go and book a hostel like the day of, I think, depending on how popular the hostel is. A lot of people do choose this option in Europe. It's definitely different than like hostels in America. There's more of like a culture surrounding it, and they're also cost effective for the most part compared to hotels especially. But I do think that sometimes if you're traveling in a big group, or just like, I mean, we were just a group of 4, Airbnbs ended up being around the same price. Our benchmark for calculating all of this was if the room or place would be under $100 per night per person. And we actually ended up finding that Airbnbs were the best option for us. A couple things I do want to note about Airbnbs and also like maybe hostels. Make sure if you're going in the summer that they have AC. ACs are not as big in Europe as they are in America. I feel like in America, you're probably guaranteed to be in an AC'd place if you're staying here. In Europe, it is definitely not the case. There have been so many like beautiful apartments and beautiful Airbnbs that we've had to just not choose because they just didn't have an AC, and that is a big thing. Like, don't underestimate your need for an AC if you're American, especially. Also, check the amount of flights of stairs that you have to walk up. A lot of apartments are also in non-elevator buildings, especially if it's in like an older building. Remember that you have luggage with you, and remember that you can be jet lagged, like anything. Don't underestimate the flights of stairs. And also check how far it is from the city town center. If it's up flights of stairs, like the Amalfi Coast, be very careful about this, because the further away from the coast that the Airbnb hotel hostel is, the more steps you're probably gonna have to climb. And we didn't know that, and we also didn't figure out the local like bus route in the city that we were in, Praiano, and we ended up having to climb like 1,000,000 stairs to do anything. It was a lovely bed and breakfast and had an insane view, but definitely was a massive trek. Figure out what is best for you. For me, it was Airbnbs, but a lot of people have other preferences and other priorities, so choose as you will. In terms of booking, like each of us chose a city that we booked in, and then we all like split it at the end. It was the easiest that way, and I'll talk a little bit more about how you split things with a group later on. But please, definitely in your stays and in your transportation, consider what you are traveling with. Which brings me to talking about packing. Definitely an exciting thing to figure out what you're bringing to Europe, what you are going to be traveling with, what outfits you're going to bring, what shoes, everything. So fun. But there's a few things we need to discuss. One thing is definitely be careful about bringing checked luggage. Definitely not impossible to bring checked luggage, just be very mindful of what your internal travel days are looking like. I've kind of already touched on that briefly. So there's a few different situations, which again, be mindful of where you're going. Don't even think about bringing checked luggage to the Amalfi Coast unless you're traveling in a very luxurious style, or if you have like a car every step of the way. Those stairs are insane. With the carry-ons, it was so hard. So I can't even imagine checked luggage. I mean, like if you look up TikToks about Amalfi Coast stairs, you will see the situation, and I feel like everyone who brings checked luggage like really struggles. Again, it could be very expensive for internal travel, and also just a pain like lugging it onto trains, and if you have like train transfers, like changing platforms or up and down stairs. But if you're going to like some bigger cities like Paris or Florence, I mean, Florence does have cobbled streets, so like again, as long as you can guarantee yourself a car, taxi, or anything, I think if you're doing that, you could probably get away with it, and it wouldn't be like any different than having a carry-on. But again, just really depends on where you're going and what the situation is. Just read reviews, do some research. You can literally just look on TikTok or Google, Pinterest, anything. YouTube is great. You can definitely do it in a carry-on. I will also say, like, save a little bit of space, because you're bound to find something or some clothing that you really like and want to take back with you. So just make sure you have space for souvenirs and things that you want to bring back. Fashion is very fun. I love personal style and also just like planning outfits and stuff for traveling. Find things you're comfortable with and find things you can pair with different outfits. Also, if there is laundry in an Airbnb, you can definitely plan on that. We ended up doing that as well. Probably leave the expensive things at home. I feel like this is just a general like travel tip that a lot of people have. Like, don't bring all your expensive things. There's just a chance of it getting lost, and tourists stand out to people, and you're more vulnerable to having things stolen from you. And then also just make sure you bring your converters and any of those things, and also just check the wattage on any pluggable tools that you're bringing, because that can really damage your tools if you are using the incorrect wattage. Safety. I feel like this is definitely more overlooked, but I feel like it's just important, especially as someone who's just more anxious and is also just a female traveler. This is important to talk about. You can either choose to carry your passport with you everywhere or just leave it in your stay. I feel like there's there's mixed opinions on this. A lot of times for ID, you will have to bring your passport. You can't just use your American driver's license or state ID. I think some places are very particular about you need like a passport to show ID. But regardless of what you choose, I think always carry a digital copy of your passport and your ID on you on your phone. If you want to print it out, you could as well. Another thing is to create a little notes tab on your phone, or you could do this on paper, but write down everyone's phone numbers in your travel group, write down their parents or closest emergency contact, I guess. Just know each other's like allergies and all of that, health things. If it's like something that you could have like a medical situation with. If you're a little bit more on the paranoid side, like me, you could write down the nearest embassies of each place you stay for the US. You can write down their number, their address, whatever you want. And also just like a few quick translations of important phrases, whether that's just like where's the nearest restroom or directional language. Greetings, you could do whatever you want. This is all just in case, right? Better safe than sorry. Also recommend downloading Google Translate. This is not only helpful for menus because some places will have menus all in their country's language, so you can use Google Translate or any like similar translation app, I guess, but also just like good in general if you're ever in a situation where you really need to ask for help, I guess. Walk around with other people. Again, like I know there's like solo travelers that exist and people feel safe doing that, but just like if it's at night or if you are just feeling a little bit uneasy, just like have a little bit of a heightened sense of safety regarding that, I think. Obviously nothing to like make you paranoid or mess up your experience, but stick with your friends and make sure everyone's okay. You know, have a buddy system if you need, especially on like transportation, like in the south of France where it's hard to get on the trains. Make sure you're locked in with someone so no one gets left behind on their own. Be very mindful of your phones in bigger cities. This is specific towards London, but I'm sure there's like other cities that also probably experience this. And like, again, just being a tourist, London specifically has a big phone theft problem. They will snatch it right out of your hands if you're walking around with it out. Just make sure that if you're carrying a purse or anything, like it's either like under your arm and like protected by it, or it has a zipper and like a deep pocket. And don't put your phone out on the table while you're eating or while you're out at a cafe or something. Literally had an experience where someone came in and put like a newspaper over to like show us, but was trying to grab my friend's phone and had to like be like, no, thank you, and like rip the phone out of their hands. Just take precautions and you're all good. Like don't be over paranoid about anything. Just make sure you're aware of what's happening locally and what's around you. And as long as you're taking precautions, like that's the most you can do, really. So I don't want to say all of this to like scare anyone. It's just like be mindful of what's going on. Have a little first aid kit / like medicine kit if you fall sick or get injured and require a medication for that. I feel like it's better to take things that you already know and that your body's already tried and tested, and it's nice to do that rather than like find a pharmacy and find different products that you've never tried before. Again, it's not that crazy or serious, just general activities. This is the fun of it all. I definitely want to say be open to trying new things, especially if you're in a group of people. Everyone's going to have interests. Hopefully you're traveling with a group that you have some common interests in or have similar ways of traveling together, similar travel preferences, etc. There might be times where you do have to try something new or try something that you wouldn't choose yourself. It's great to have like strong opinions of things you want to do, and you know, if there's something that is like strong enough that you want to do, like make sure that is heard and voiced. And if you're traveling with a great group, they'll make it happen. One thing I actually saw on TikTok recently was this group of 4. They were traveling to a city for 4 days exactly. So each one of them got to plan an entire day exactly how they would do it and everything they wanted to do. I thought that was just such a lovely idea. Just in general, like the fun of it is being in a new country, traveling, being on vacation with your friends. I think that's like the main thing. And if you can center around that, you'll have a very enjoyable experience experience no matter what you do. For finding things to do, definitely my top suggestions are look on TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube. Everyone's got a travel vlog. There's so many travel specific bloggers and vloggers, so there's a lot of content and resources out there that you can use to find things. I think also one thing to do is figure out where you want to spend your money predominantly, especially if you are putting yourself on a budget of any severity. Like, you will probably have to choose what you end up spending your money on. I think for a lot of places while I was studying abroad, one thing I didn't want to do was spend a lot of money on like museums and stuff. I love museums, but at the end of the day, like, they can be very expensive once you add it all up, and there were just like other things that I wanted to do around the cities, so I had to kind of leave that for future me to explore. But you can choose categories you want to spend on and not spend on, like going out, food, attractions, shopping. There's so many other categories that you can kind of decide on. Okay, a few miscellaneous things I want to talk about. Download Splitwise. It is a great tool to use when you are in a group. Everyone's kind of like sharing costs of things, splitting things, paying on their own for things. This basically like takes every cost, like everyone can input everything that you've spent money on or someone else has spent money on and how it's been split into a group, and then at the end it'll kind of basically give you like a list of like who owes how much to each person in a cumulative way, so like you're not just Venmoing each other back and forth. It is so good. Like, I'm so glad someone invented this. Really helpful. Another thing, make sure you have an international phone plan or like an international upgrade you could do, or that you're just buddied with someone who has an international plan, especially if you end up in a situation where your group gets separated and you need to relocate with one another. It's very important. Another like safety thing, I guess. And then finally, if you are any sort of the planning type, I feel like you will enjoy this, but it's really helpful, and I feel like it's very important to keep a doc, like a master doc of everything you could ever need, like a home base, anything that you can track, anything that you can write down, especially if someone is booking something themselves or another person in your group has something booked for all of you. Like, just having all of the details available for everyone to see is really helpful. Basically, we had a master doc of everyone's flight details, like the international flights, hotel details, travel routes, links, budgets, and all the activities we wanted to do all in one place. And we just like shared this as a group. It was so helpful and also just like so fun to look back on. And I think it helped us be very organized and very on top of things. I think that is everything. If I haven't covered something specific, or if you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments. If you have any travel tips yourselves, please also like let me know down below, especially like other international destinations. If you have specific tips, I would love to hear them. I really love learning a lot about traveling and like kind of figuring all of that out, because it is something that I'm very passionate about at this point in my life. I hope you enjoy this little very long chat. It's been a long time in the making. I'm only just now sitting down to do this. I intended to do it last year, like right when I got back, but it's been nearly a year because I just got into like a very perfectionist headspace, but that doesn't matter. It's just like I want to talk about this and get it out there because I feel like this could be helpful for people. I feel like I was looking for travel tips. Hopefully this is helpful, and I know a lot of you have also asked me questions on my videos before about all of this, so really hoping I covered everything. But again, let me know in the comments if there's anything else. Yes, there is something in the works for this year. I'm very excited about it, and I hope I can like update this video as I gain more experience and travel tips, but that is it for now. Thank you so much for watching. My travel content is very dear to my heart because I have the most fun editing them. I feel like they gain the most traction on YouTube, so I see a lot of people commenting and interacting with those videos. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you soon.